Chaim, l'chaim.
Chaim.
In 1945, after achieving victory in Europe, the Allied leaders called for Japan to surrender unconditionally in what was known as the Potsdam Conference, and they wanted to avoid an invasion of the Japanese island and many lives that would be lost in such an invasion, in such a battle. Originally, Japan kept quiet. They didn't respond to the request for their unconditional surrender. However, in one of the press briefings, reporters kept on asking the Prime Minister, what does he say to the, what is his response? And he tried to avoid the question until he responded with a single word. The word is mokusatsu. Anybody speak Japanese over here? Mokusatsu? No? Now, the word literally means a deadly silence. And there are actually different ways of, it actually can have different meanings in different contexts. Right? On one hand, it could mean that we're not ready to respond right now. We're still, making up our minds. We're still deciding. As, similar to no comment. Or it could also mean we're completely ignoring this, or we look at it, we look down at it with contempt. It's not worthy of a response. Now, you can imagine which translation the media chose to publicize, right? And we all know the result of that story, of that deadly silence, right, was the dropping of 2 atom bombs, killing between 150 and 250,000 people.
What do you mean?
What you just said.
Now, after the war, a debate broke out. What exactly was the original intention? Right? There were those who argued that the original intention was, we're still taking our time. We're still not sure. There are other historians who disagree, who say no. They originally intended to ignore and to reject the surrender request. But today most historians think that it was actually an accurate translation, but there's no real way to know. But what is clear is that you can have a single word with 2 different meanings and very, very, very different consequences, right? Now, we all, when we speak, we need to be careful what we say, because sometimes what we say can have different interpretations. And we have to realize that it can be taken and understood in different ways. And even though we might mean one thing, somebody else could understand something else. Now, in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, when Yaakov sends a message to Esav and he davens to Hashem, we find many examples of things that Yaakov says which have 2 different meanings, 2 different explanations, right? So almost everything that Yaakov sends in the message to Esav has 2 completely different meanings. But and there are many different discussions about why Yaakov has these 2 different intentions. But we're going to discuss. We can start off with in Lavan Garti, so it can mean on a simple level that I was Rashi gives 2 different explanations. I was a stranger there, or that I kept all the mitzvahs, right? Yaakov said I had a donkey. It could mean a simple donkey, or it could mean that I'm anticipating the coming of Mashiach, right? But today we're going to focus.
A lot of things different.
Now we're going to focus on something that happened a little bit later when Yaakov is davening to Hashem, and he says to Hashem, "Please, Hashem, you've done so much kindness towards me. I feel small in comparison to all the kindness that you did to me. Because I crossed the Jordan River with my staff, with my stick, and now I have these 2 great camps." What does it mean I crossed the Jordan River with my stick?
I know.
So Rashi brings 2 different explanations, right? One explanation is, so first of all, we all know the story that when Yaakov was running away from Esav's son Eliphaz chased after Yaakov. He caught up with him and he wanted to kill him. And Yaakov, pleaded with him, and Eliphaz had studied Torah under Yaakov and under Yitzchak. And he said, my father told me I have to kill you. I have no choice. So Yaakov told him that somebody who has no money is as good as dead. Ani chashuv kemes. So he took all of Yaakov's money and he took everything that belonged to Yaakov, including his clothing. Yaakov was hungry, penniless, and naked. And the only thing he had with him was a stick. And when he crossed the river, that's all he had. And as he was crossing the river, he saw a soldier who fell into the river and drowned, and he was able to take that soldier's clothing. But when he originally crossed the river, he had nothing with him except for the stick. So that's one explanation. Right? A poor man can pick up a stick. It's not very hard to find a stick. So the first explanation is that Yaakov said, I had nothing. I had just a stick. I didn't even have clothing. The second explanation Rashi gives is that Hashem performed a tremendous miracle for Yaakov. Yaakov picked up the stick and he split the Jordan River with his stick. And these two explanations seem to be complete opposites. On one hand, one explanation is that he had nothing, he was naked and penniless, and he just had a stick. And the other explanation is that Hashem performed such a great miracle for him and allowed him to split the river with his stick. So how could you have these two different explanations on the same words? Another question we need to understand, what does it mean? It seems a little bit insensitive to say that a poor person is as good as dead. I know a lot of poor people, they're not, they're nice people, right? As good as dead, that's what we refer to them as. And a third question is, if we look in halacha and we want to find what is considered a poor person, so we're told in the Mishnah that a person who has less than 200 zuz, and he doesn't have a business, so he doesn't have any way to invest his money, is considered a poor person. It doesn't say he has to be naked. It doesn't say he can't have any food. So why did Eliphaz insist on not just taking away Yaakov's money, which I guess he had to do? He wanted the Yaakov to be considered a poor person. But he could have taken away his money, but instead he insisted on taking away his money and his clothing. Where do we find such a thing? A poor person doesn't have clothing? What?
Maybe he didn't know Shurim.
Oh, you're saying, but he learned Torah under Yaakov. Yaakov could have taught him, right? What? So why did he have to take Yaakov's clothing? And we find in many other examples of people who were considered poor. Das and Vavira, for example, were considered dead because they lost their money. But it doesn't say anywhere that they lost their clothes. Why did Eliphaz have to take Yaakov's clothes? Where does this idea come from? So, in order to understand this, we first have to understand the story, that the very famous story that the Gemara in Gittin, Samach Ches Amud Beis, tells us. The Gemara tells us that when the first Beis Hamikdash was being built, Shlomo HaMelech was building the Beis Hamikdash. He had a big problem. They had to build the Beis Hamikdash out of stone, but they weren't allowed to use axes, swords, or any sort of iron in the building of the Mizbeach, right? So how are they supposed to go ahead and build it? So he turned to the Chachamim and he said, how are we supposed to build the Mizbeach? We're not allowed to use, well, this is a halachic question, right? This is not, a smart person doesn't figure out halacha. He has to ask his rabbi and look in the Svarim and figure out what Hashem taught by Rabbeinu. So he turns to the Chachamim and he says, how are you supposed to build the Beis HaMikdash? So they told him about a certain creation called a shamir. We're not sure exactly what it is. Perhaps some sort of worm, which is able to cut through hard rock. So Shlomo HaMelech says, well, where can I find this shamir? So they tell him, we don't know. How am I supposed to get it? Well, you can ask the demons, right? Maybe they know. Okay, so Shlomo HaMelech was king not just over mankind, over people. He was king over animals, angels, and demons as well. So he brings two demons and he orders them to tell him where he can find the shamir. They say, sorry, we don't know. So who does know? Well, maybe our leader, Ashmedai, king of the demons, perhaps he knows.
The whole story now?
What? Of course.
Oh, there's a guy you gotta listen to.
Perhaps our leader, Ashmedai, king of the demons, might know where to find it. Okay, where can I find Ashmedai, king of the demons? Well, he lives on this mountain, somewhere far away from a human settlement. And what does he do? Tell us a little bit about his life, his schedule. And he says, well, what's his job? What does he do? Well, every morning he gets up and he flies up to heaven to study in the heavenly yeshiva. And then he comes down into the world and he studies among the earthly yeshivas as well. The Mesifta, the Rakia, Mesifta, the Ara. And finally, at the end of the day, when he's tired and exhausted, he goes back to his mountain. And he has over there in the mountain, there's a hole in the mountain that he dug out, where I guess demons don't need to eat, but he needs to drink. And he has over there a little cave that he dug out over there with water, which is filled with water. And he goes to take a drink. But he wants during the day when he's gone, he's worried somebody might get into his cave, so he seals the cave and he seals it shut with his special seal that nobody could open, and he can tell, I guess he can tell if somebody tampered with it, and that way he knows that nobody invaded his private space. Okay? So Shlomo HaMelech thinks, what can we do over here? So he calls over Ben Yehoyada, his general, and he gives him, he tells him the plan, and he sends him off to this mountain, and he takes with him a ring, a golden ring which was engraved with the name of Hashem, a golden chain which was engraved with Hashem's name, and some big pieces of wool, and a few barrels of wine, or flasks of wine, right? So he comes to this mountain and he's watching and waiting, and sure enough, in the morning, Ashmedai comes out of his cave. He seals the entrance of the cave shut, and he flies up to heaven. So Benio comes out, and he goes a little bit lower down the mountain, and he begins digging a cave a little bit lower down under Ashmedai's cave. Right? He digs out a whole cave over there, and he digs up from the bottom from under Ashmedai's cave. Right? As soon as he gets to Ashmedai's cave, of course, all the water that had filled the cave,
like a bank job.
Like a bank job.
You knew what he was doing, right? So all the water, of course, immediately flowed out of the cave into this lower cave. And then he proceeded to stuff up the hole with the wool that he had brought with him. So that way the hole would now be sealed. Then he went back out, he climbed up the mountain, he went on top of Ashmedai's cave, and he began digging a second hole up on top. Right? And he digs a hole on the top into Ashmedai's cave, and he takes the wine and he begins pouring the wine into the cave. Right? So he finishes just in time. As he's finishing the job, he manages to hide, and Ashmedai comes back. He examines the seal. It looks like everything is good over here. Everything's fine. He opens up the cave and he's about to drink. Smells different, right? And he tastes it. It tastes like wine. How did wine get into my cave? I don't know, but I don't know. Wine, it's not very good to drink wine. And he begins quoting different verses from the Torah that speak about how wine removes a person's wisdom, makes him foolish, takes away a person's heart. Right? I'm not going to touch the wine. And a few minutes goes by and he's getting really thirsty, and apparently there was no other water in that area. I don't know why he couldn't fly somewhere else, but he was getting very thirsty. And he's like, it's not so bad. It also says good things about wine, right? It also says the wine gladdens your heart, right? So he takes some wine and he has a good drink, right? He drinks and he falls asleep after drinking the wine.
It was strong wine, right?
It was strong wine, of course, and he's drunk, he falls asleep. And Benio runs out. He takes this golden chain with Hashem's name on it, and he ties and he chains him up, right? A while later, Ashmedai gets up and he sees his chain, and he's like, this little puny metal chain. I'm going to rip it open. But Benio standing there is like, no, if you rip it open, you're going to break the name of Hashem, right? Hashem's name is engraved on this chain. Like, okay, then I'll attack you, but he has the ring with Hashem's name on it, right? Okay, he has no choice, so Benio starts leading him back to Yerushalayim, right? And they're traveling. The Gemara tells us on the way, Ashmedai is not very happy being led back as a captive, so as they're walking by the road, every tree that's like near the road, he knocks over. And as they're passing through a town, he starts knocking down the houses on both sides of the road. And then they come all the way to the edge of the town. There's like this poor little house, and this old widow comes out and she starts begging, like, please don't destroy my house. and he was about to knock her house over, but at the last minute he pulls back and he breaks one of his bones. And the Gemara says that's what the Torah says, that a soft tongue can break a bone. Okay, they continue traveling, and they meet this blind person walking down the road, and he's a little lost. And Ashmedai turns to me, he's like, we got to stop over here, we got to help him out. Ashmedai asks him where he wants to go, and they help him, they lead him where he needs to go. They continue walking, and they see a drunk walking, and he's also a little bit lost. And Ashmedai says, we got to help him too. So they help this drunkard, they help him find the way. And as they're continuing to travel, and they pass by, and they hear some music, and as they get close, they see it's a wedding going on, and everyone's singing and dancing, and Ashmedai starts to cry. Okay, they pass by the wedding hall, and they get near the market, and they come to the market, and they see it's this cobbler, making shoes, and this guy coming over to the cobbler. He's like, I need you to make me a very high quality pair of shoes. I want it to last for at least 7 years. And Ashmedai starts laughing, rolling on the floor, laughing. And they continue traveling, and they see this fortune teller. He's sitting there, and he's announcing, anybody who wants me to tell me their fortune, I can tell you whatever you want to know. And again, Ashmedai sort of rolls on the floor. He starts laughing again. Finally, they make it to Yerushalayim, and Benio turns to turns to Ashmedai, and he says, maybe you could explain to me what was going on along the way. And Ashmedai says, sure. What do you want to know? He says, what was going on with that blind person that you helped out? And he says, he was a perfect tzaddik. He was a tzaddik gomer, and there was an announcement made in heaven that anybody who helps him out will be greatly rewarded. So I wanted to help him out. I was like, and the drunkard was also a tzaddik gomer. And he says, no. The drunkard was a terrible person, but they wanted to give him his reward. He did up a couple of mitzvahs in his life. So they wanted to give him the reward in this world, so they made an announcement that he should be helped out. Okay, what was going on with the wedding? Why were you crying at the wedding? And he says, everybody was rejoicing, but they didn't realize that within 30 days, the groom is going to pass away. And unfortunately, he has one sibling, a young baby who was just born, and when he passes away, his wife is not going to be allowed to remarry for the next 13 years until his younger brother can actually do chalitza.
Where's chalitza?
A woman whose husband passes away without children has to either marry the husband's brother, or they can do a chalitza ceremony where the husband's brother releases her of this obligation.
But he has to be 13 years old.
He has to be 13 years old to do it, and he's a baby now. So that's why I was crying. Okay, why were you laughing at the cobbler who was making the 7-year shoes? He's like, this guy's not going to live for another 7 days. 7 years, he wants the shoes for 7 years. Right? And what was going on with the fortune teller? Well, the fortune teller, he was telling everybody how he knows everything, and he tells them their future, and he could tell them everything about their lives, and he was sitting right on top of a buried treasure, and he didn't even know. Right? Okay, so they lock Ashmedai up in the palace, and the next morning he gets up, and he's waiting to be called to Shlomo HaMelech, but Shlomo HaMelech doesn't call for him. So he turns to the guards, and he's like, what's going on? Why aren't they bringing me to the king? And they tell him, well, the king drank a little too much today, and he's not in a state where he could
hangover.
hungover a little bit. So Ashmedai takes I guess there were some loose bricks on the floor of his cell, so he picks up 2 bricks and he puts one of them on top of the other. So they go and they tell Shlomo HaMelech what happened, and he says, Ashmedai was saying it's good to drink, you should give him some more wine. So he was piling the bricks on top of each other. He was saying, give him some more to drink. The next day they call again, Ashmedai is waiting to be called, and he's not called again. So again he turns to the guards, he's like, what's going on? Shlomo HaMelech drank, he's hungover again, he drank too much again? So like, no, today he ate too much and he's not feeling so good. So Ashmedai this time he takes the pile of bricks and starts taking them apart and throwing the bricks on the floor. And he tells Shlomo HaMelech, and he says, well, he's telling me not to have to eat that much. I should eat less. I should go on a diet. Right? Finally, on the third day, they tell him that Shlomo HaMelech wants to see him. And as he's going, he somehow managed to pick up a measuring rod, a ruler, which measured 4 amos in length. And he comes to Shlomo HaMelech, and he's like, you see this? Shlomo HaMelech's like, yeah. And he says, you know that when you die, you're going to be buried in this size plot of earth, right? And you think you're so great that now you have to rule over not just the whole Israel, not just the whole world. You want to capture me as well? You're not happy with what you have? And Shlomo Melech says, well, I have no desire to capture you, but I need to build the Beis Hamikdash for Hashem. And I was told that you're the only one who could help me. And perhaps you know where I could find this shamir. And he says, well, I don't have it. I don't have this shamir, but I can tell you who does. It was given over to the angel who's in charge of the sea, and he gave it over for safekeeping into the hands of a certain bird. And okay, what does this bird do with it? Well, this bird uses it to crack open mountains and plant seeds in different, in different mountains to make them flourish, to make things grow. Okay, fine. They find out exactly where they can find this bird. And Shlomo Melech again sends Benio, his general, on the next mission, and he comes to the nest of the bird, and he waits till the bird leaves, and then he takes a big glass container and he covers the nest with glass. Right? The bird comes back at night and it wants to feed its kids, and it sees the kids there and he's trying to get through, but it's covered with glass, he can't get in. So the bird runs away to bring the shamir worm to open up to break through the glass. And as the bird comes back, Benio jumps out and he chases the bird away and he grabs the shamir. I guess he probably picked up the glass. And he went back to Shlomo Melech, and Shlomo Melech was able to use this to build the Beis Hamikdash. However, he still kind of felt that he might need some more help in the future, so he decided he's going to keep Ashmedai until they finish building the Beis Hamikdash. So, as they're finishing to build the Beis Hamikdash, Shlomo Melech goes out to speak to, I guess probably after they finish building, he goes out to speak to Ashmedai. And he says, he wants to release Ashmedai, but he says to him, the Pasuk says about Hashem, it says, Keil Moitzia Mimitzrayim Kesoya Fais Re'eim Loi. That Hashem, who redeemed the Jewish people from Egypt, has great horns like a wild ox. Now, of course, obviously this is not physical description of Hashem, but it refers to different spiritual things, and the great horns refer to the angels of Hashem, while the wild ox refers to the demons. So he says, you're the leader of the demons. What makes you so special that Hashem is praised and having you serve him? And he says, well, you don't know who I am? You don't know what I could do? And Shlomo says, no, you haven't really shown me any of your greatness. And he says, well, I'm tied up in this golden chain. Maybe if you release me from the chain, I can show you. And somehow the smartest man on earth made the choice to remove the chain. I don't know. If I was in his place, I don't think I would make the same decision. But perhaps he must have had reasons that we're not aware of. And he removed the chain from Ashmedai. And Ashmedai says, well, you're holding you have that ring with Hashem's name on it. I can't do anything in front of that ring. Take off the ring. He takes off the ring, and Ashmedai immediately begins expanding and increasing in size until his wings reach from the earth to the heavens. And he picked up Shlomo Melech, and he threw him 400 parsais. Parsa, I guess, up to 4 mil, it says. So, right? So I guess that's 1,600 miles. Or mil, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what a mil is. But, right? And Shlomo Melech finds himself in the middle of nowhere. And he has, he begins walking around. He's trying to find he meets people. He starts telling him, I'm Shlomo Melech. And they're like, yeah, right. Sure. Right? And everyone's laughing at him. And he's...
He's naked?
No, he wasn't naked, but I'm sure his clothes probably weren't, during his travels, in the beginning, I'm sure his clothes looked very nice, but after traveling for a few hundred miles, I'm sure his clothes didn't look as good as they used to. And the Gemara describes as he was wandering and begging for food, and he was saying, he'd ask the people to give him food, and how he was saying that everything he thought he was so great, but look at him now. And finally, after a very long period of time, he made his way back to Yerushalayim, and he comes in, he begins telling everybody how he's Shlomo HaMelech, and of course everybody laughs at him, throws things at him, they chase him away, but he continues insisting that he's Shlomo HaMelech, and after a while people started to realize, even crazy people change their story a little bit, they don't come every day with the same story, so eventually the Chacham of the Sanhedrin decided to investigate, and they asked Shlomo HaMelech's generals if he had called for them recently, and they said no. And then he asked Shlomo HaMelech's wives, and they said, he seems normal. I guess he's a little quieter than usual, but everything seems okay. So the Sanhedrin asked him if they had seen his feet recently. And he said no. He sleeps with the socks on. For the last few months, he's never removed his socks. Okay, so I guess there must be something over here. So they call this beggar who claims to be Shlomo HaMelech, and they say, what could we do? How could we help you? What can we do for you? And he says, you got to get me a chain with Hashem's name engraved on it, and a ring, and that's what they do. And he comes into the palace, and as Ashmedai sees him coming, Ashmedai flies away and never comes back. And Shlomo HaMelech has returned to his throne. So, the Gemara in Sanhedrin speaks of this story, and it says that Shlomo HaMelech, in the beginning, he was king over Elyonim v'Tachtonim, over the upper realms and the lower realms. But later on, he was Malach al Makle. He was king over his stick. He was king over his stick. That's all he ruled over. And this is a very strange expression, because I would have said, he's no more a king. He used to be a king. Now he's not a king anymore. But the Gemara insists that he was still a king, but now, instead of being a king over the whole world, over the upper realms and the lower realms, now he was a king over his stick. So what does this mean, king over his stick? So, in order to understand this, we're going to contrast two stories, two different people. We're going to contrast Rabbi Akiva, right? You all know who Rabbi Akiva was, and Adolf Merkel. Everybody knows Adolf Merkel? No? Okay. So, let's start off with Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva married, of course, we all know the story. He marries the daughter of Kalba Savua. Her father kicks them out of the house, and now they have nowhere to stay. They find some barn at the edge of the city where they're laying down on the straw over there. And for Rabbi Akiva, of course, this was not a very pleasant experience, but for his wife, it was even more difficult, right? She had come from such a wealthy home, and now she lost everything, and she was very sad, and she was a bit depressed. So the Gemara tells us in Nedarim Daf Nun, the Gemara tells us that Hashem sent Eliyahu Hanavi to knock on the entrance of their barn. Eliyahu Hanavi comes disguised as a poor person. He knocks on the door of their barn. Rabbi Akiva opens up the door. He says, "What do you want?" And he says, "Please help me. Please help me." How can we help you? We're living in a barn, right? You realize we're living in a barn. And he's like, "Yeah, my wife just gave birth to a baby, and we don't have anywhere for her to lay down. We don't even have any straw. You have so much straw in this barn. Could you give me a little bit of straw?" So Rabbi Akiva and his wife give him some straw. "Thank you so much for the straw." Rabbi Akiva turns to his wife and he's like, "We're so lucky. We have so much straw, right? We have so much straw." That's the story of Rabbi Akiva. Now let's switch over to Adolf Merkel, right? On January 5th, 2009, Adolf Merkel, who was one of the richest men in the world, walked out of his house and he walked towards the nearby train tracks. And he stood there for a while until he saw the train approaching in the distance. As the train is approaching, Adolf proceeded to lay down on the tracks and wait for the train, and the train ran him over. Now, why would he do such a thing? So,
He couldn't tell us.
in the year I think he left. The year before, in 2008, in I guess the global market recession in 2008, Adolf had lost $4 billion. Right? Anybody here lost $4 billion?
I wish I can.
I with last year I lost some money in the stock market, but I didn't
That's
lose.
a lot of zeros.
but
That's a lot of zeros.
But I didn't lose anything
right.
close. I didn't lose anything close to $4 billion. And I guess, how would anybody feel if they lost $4 billion? So he felt that it wasn't worth living anymore. And he chose to end his life. Now, the problem was that not the problem, but the interesting fact over here is that at the time of his death, he was still worth $9 billion, right? So he went from 13 billion to 9 billion. And for him, that was enough of a reason. For him, that meant that life was not worth living. See, in 2007, he was listed as the 44th richest person in the world, in the top 50. In 2008, he was only the 94th richest person in the world.
That's terrible.
He was now no longer in the top 50. Now he's only in the top 100.
Poor guy.
Right? So it's not worth living anymore. So we can take a look at Rabbi Akiva.
I was alive.
And Adolf Merkel, right? Rabbi Akiva is sitting there in a barn with straw, and he says, "Look how much straw we have. Look how lucky we are. We have so much straw." And Mr. Merkel is sitting on $9 billion, and he's like, "Oh, I lost $4 billion. Not worth living anymore." Right? And this really is a choice that we all have. The Kotzker Rebbe explains that this is what's going on with Shlomo HaMelech. Right? We all find ourselves in situations where sometimes we lose something that we want. We have something and we lose it. And we have two choices. We can either say, right, look at what I lost. I lost $4 million. It's not worth living. Or we could say, look at how much straw I have. And this is what happened with Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech was the most powerful person in the world. And now he's thrown away and he has nothing left. What does Shlomo HaMelech say? Does he say, look at the kingdom that I lost? I have no more king over the angels. I'm not king over Jerusalem anymore. I don't have my palace. He says, no, I'm still a king. I'm a king over a stick. Right? I'm Malach al-Makla. He's still the king of his stick. Right? Shlomo HaMelech walked around every day and he says, I don't have Yerushalayim anymore, but I still have a stick. I'm still the king. I still have straw. Look how much straw I have. Right? And this, says the Kotzker Rebbe, is what enabled Shlomo HaMelech to return to his original position. If he would have stopped at that moment and said everything is over, he might have also made a decision which would have resulted in him never returning to his original glory. But he made a choice. And he said, right now, right, I lost everything, but I'm still a king. I'm a king over my stick. And that's what enabled him to return and to become a king again later. And this is what's good. This is what this is what it means when it says ani chashuv kameis, that a poor person is like a dead person. What does that mean? It means that there are many people who have nothing and who walk around saying, "My life is not worth living." Right? I want to jump on the train tracks. Chas v'shalom. Now, what's the measure? How does that work? So every person is different. There are some people who can have $9 billion. But still be an ani, still be a poor person. And there's another person who can have a little bit of straw, who could be walking around with a stick, and who could say, look what I have. I have straw. I have a stick. This is my life. This is what I have. And that's what was going on with Yaakov. Eliphaz comes over to Yaakov, and Yaakov tells him, a poor person, it's as good as dead, right? He doesn't have anything. So Eliphaz turns to Yaakov. What?
He was 74 years old already.
So Eliphaz turns to Yaakov, and he says, give me all your money. And Yaakov gives him all his money. So Eliphaz says, no, you have nothing left, right? You're as good as dead. And Yaakov's like, no, I still have my suitcase over here. I have my clothes. Okay, give me the suitcase, right? He takes away Yaakov's suitcase. He says, now you got nothing left, right? And Yaakov says, no, I still have my sandwich in my pocket, right? I still got some food with me. He grabs the sandwich away. He grabs all of his food. He says to Yaakov, no, now you got nothing left. And Yaakov says, no, I have shoes. Good, nice, comfortable shoes. He takes Yaakov's shoes. He takes his socks. He says to Yaakov, no, you have nothing left now. Yaakov says, no, I still got a shirt on my back. So Eliphaz took away Yaakov's shirt, right? He left him naked. And finally, after he has nothing left, finally, Yaakov, he says, no, you have anything left? And for a moment, Yaakov was like, it looks like I got nothing, right? It looks like I got nothing. And Eliphaz all excited, so happy, he runs home to tell his father, Yaakov's as good as dead. And Yaakov stands there for a minute. He bends down to the ground and he finds a tree branch on the floor. He picks it up and he says, now I have a stick. I don't have nothing anymore, I have a stick. And he takes his stick and he crosses the river with his stick. What does that mean, he crosses the river with his stick? Instead of walking around and saying, I have nothing, I lost everything. He said, no, I have a stick. I'm king over my stick. And that's why. There's a second explanation in the same words. This stick enabled him to split the rivers in front of him. Enabled him to move anything that was blocking him out of his path. Because someone who has that attitude, right? Forget about what I used to have. Forget about what I lost. I have a stick. I have straw. I'm king over my stick. Someone like that can split rivers. Someone like that, nothing will ever stop you. And this is what Yaakov was saying with these two different explanations. Right? He was saying, I crossed the river with my stick because I recognized. Because I didn't focus on what I lost, because I focused on what I had. That's why I was able to cross the river with my stick. So each and every one of us in our own lives, right? We have situations where we, where we lose $4 billion. Maybe a little slightly smaller than $4 billion. And we have a choice. We can either say, I lost $4 billion, the $9 billion are worthless, it's not worth living. Or we can look around and we can say, look how much straw we have. I'm still king over my stick. L'chaim, we should all make the right choice. We should all be king over our sticks. We should all look at all the straw that we have, and it should enable us to cross the rivers and to achieve great things in life. L'chaim.
L'chaim.